All right, everybody, we're getting a twofer today, except the second vlog is going to be in my home office and not my mobile office. Fani Willis updates because as we eagerly await Scott McAfee's decision as to whether or not Fani Willis and Nathan Wade get disqualified from the RICO prosecution of Trump, Michael Roman, Jeffrey Clark, and I think 15 other defendants, there is some news a-brewing. As relates to Scott McAfee's and now Fani Willis's run for re-election, because now both of them have not one, but two challengers each. And there have been some specific developments on Fani Willis's case because she got a rather healthy, what's the opposite of endorsement? Oh yes, political admonishment from someone who is now endorsing her rival in her election. But first, let's get back to the basics. Who's running against Scott McAfee? From The Guardian, McAfee, who presides over the Trump election interference and racketeering case in Fulton County, faces two challengers from the left. Robert Patillo, a progressive attorney and talk show host in Atlanta, Tiffany Johnson, a former senior staff attorney for the Fulton County judge, Melanie Leftridge. So what's interesting when people make an announcement that they are running for office or entering or re-entering public life, people on the internet immediately start scouring the interwebs for their footprint to see if they've posted anything incriminating, embarrassing, whatever. I went back just to look at Robert Patillo. He doesn't seem to have all that much that's bad. I mean, he's an activist and that is good or bad depending on the activism or depending on how you feel about the activism. But he did have one rather funny video of him on RT, Russia television or Russian television, making some predictions that were bad at the time that never came to fruition.
Robert, legally, did you see a smoking gun anywhere in the 2,500 pages that were released today by the Judiciary Committee, and then also following up with the conclusion of the Senate Intel Committee, which is at odds from the House Intel Committee? Your thoughts?
Well, what I think we saw in the 2,500 pages is that there's continuous smoke. Ted was just saying the Democrats need to stop talking about the investigation. The problem is every single day there's a new trickle of information, whether it's the Don Jr. testimony, whether it's Manafort, whether it's Flynn, whether it's entirely down the line of the people in the orbit of the president that looks like they had more connections to the Russians than they initially disclosed. The problem is that when you lie about things, when you continuously make false statements that are easily proven to be false and then change the statement later, it erodes the trust of the American people. So this is not going away. This will be an issue in the midterms, and I guarantee you, Speaker of the House Maxine Waters will start impeachment proceedings immediately when she's sworn in next February.
Speaker of the House Maxine Waters, you're breaking news here tonight, Robert. All right.
Look, I guarantee Speaker of the House Maxine Waters will wrap this up.
All right. Well, that's a stone's throw. There's no question about that.
And as for Tiffany Johnson, well, I really couldn't uncover all that much because she doesn't seem to have that much of a social media footprint, but I'm sure other sleuths on the internet will continue trying. Now, getting back to the big Fani. Fani Willis actually has two people running against her, or one running against her in the general that's going to take place in May, and a Republican who made the cut just at the limit who's going to run against her in November. But for those of you who haven't heard this news, this is the news. Two runners against her, and this is who they are.
District Attorney Fani Willis now has two people running to take her seat. Democrat Christian Wise Smith and Republican Courtney Kramer just qualified to run for the office today. You may remember Christian Wise Smith ran against DA Willis 4 years ago and actually worked with her under former DA Paul Howard. And as of tonight, he has not officially decided whether he will launch his campaign. Courtney Kramer is an attorney who specializes in constitutional, political, and election law. She is the first Republican to run for the DA's office in more than 2 decades. The primary for the DA's race, and other government seats will be held in May. And of course, the general election is coming up in November.
Now, when you hear that there is a Democrat or a lefty running against Fani Willis, you might be saying, well, at the very least, they won't be corrupt or potentially not as corrupt as Fani Willis. To be determined, but I went to look into, what's the guy's name? Christian Wise Smith, to see what his social media footprint might leave in its wake. And I found one rather telling video which will give you a good idea as to where Christian Wise Smith aligns himself politically and ideologically.
So predictable. White supremacists are not held accountable because too many politicians lack the courage to call it out. Too afraid that by doing so, they may not be electable. I'm a prosecutor, not a politician. I don't think like a politician. I act like a prosecutor whose job is to keep you safe, which is why I'm the only candidate in this race who has called out white supremacist gangs since the beginning. My opponents can't even say the words white supremacy, so how can we expect them to hold white supremacists accountable? If we want different, we have to vote different. I'm Christian Wise Smith, and it's time.
Now, I don't know all that much about Georgia politics and Georgia crime rate, but I think I know enough to potentially suspect that white supremacy might not be the biggest crime issue in Georgia. Just taking a wild guess out there. And maybe I don't get out enough, but I have never in my life seen any of this white supremacy. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying it maybe is not the most prevalent problem or among the most prevalent problems in America, because if it is, I guess I should have something to fear. But there you have it. Both Fani Willis and Scott McAfee are facing challengers, and I happen to think that them having run a very activist person against Scott McAfee is actually going to play against Fani Willis, because I think right now Scott McAfee has basically no disincentive to follow the law and disqualify Fani, because they are running a Democrat activist against Scott McAfee. And if they're going to play the race card and the politics card, Scott McAfee, who is a white male appointed by Kemp, the Governor Kemp, who's also a Republican, he has no chance if they're going to play racial, ethnic identity politics, and so he may as well just follow the law and disqualify the Fani. But that's not even the worst news for Fani Willis. Fani today had an organization come out outright against her. I tell you, people, we are witnessing a change in the political tides here. People are smelling blood in the water. People are seeing Fani Willis as an injured fish, and the sharks are circling. Where Fani Willis was once untouchable, basically the gang boss, the big boss of the DA's office, whereas once she was untouchable and intimidating everybody, people now see weakness and people are now coming out against her. The political tide is changing to the point where Scott McAfee might actually win re-election by yeeting the corrupt Fani Willis from the case. And for those of you who may not have heard, you should be following Phil Holloway on Twitter. But if you haven't heard, this is the anti-endorsement that Fani Willis got today. Re-elect Jordan Riley, State House District 22. As state representatives, we take the rule of law seriously and expect all elected officials to do the same. The current district attorney of Fulton County, Fani Willis, has neglected her constituents by failing to prosecute criminals and has instead chosen to engage in political games to elevate her own name. We proudly endorse Courtney Kramer, Republican candidate for Fulton County District Attorney. Ms. Kramer has what it takes to end the political games and focus on making Atlanta safer. As an attorney who has worked for a former president and many respectable judges and legal professionals, Ms. Kramer has shown the ability to stand up for what is right even when the opposition is strong. We urge the citizens of Fulton County to prioritize safety over politics and elect Republican candidate Courtney Kramer for District Attorney. Signed, Speaker Pro Tem Jan Jones, District 47, Majority Leader Chuck F. Strachan, District 104, Caucus Chair Bruce Williamson, District 112, and you have a slew of other representatives that you can pause and read on your own. Now, admittedly, those are all Republicans or conservatives who would come out against Fani Willis if it were just Courtney Kramer and Fani Willis, but I'm telling you, they smell blood in the water. Fani Willis is an injured fish, and the sharks are circling, and as we await Scott McAfee's decision, we can really feel the political tide changing, receding. It's bad news for Fani. Corruption that is kept quiet can be easily managed, but corruption that is now not only national but international, that has to face some political consequences. And so that is the latest. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. Viva Frei on Rumble, the Viva Frei on Twitter, vivabarneslaw.locals.com in our wonderful locals community where everyone is above average. This coming Wednesday, the day after tomorrow, as of the time of shooting this, I'm going to be back on The Unusual Suspects. It's a Patrick Bet David valuetainment production. You can find it on YouTube. It's great. I'll be talking about the latest in the Fani Willis scandal, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have a decision by then, but we expect a decision this week, and I'm standing by my prediction. The Fani is hitting the fan. That's it, people. Now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!
We're going to start today by reading together a short story entitled My Sister Fani. Quiet. Okay, so let's all open up our Reading is Fun books to page 69.
69.